Hi, my name is Megan, and today I'll be taking you through the DIVERT site tracker for intervention caseloads. So in the first tab called Caseload ID, we'll put in the name of the caseload, so let's say it's 1. The case manager is the person entering the data, so let's say it's Megan. And the start date is the date the caseload was first opened, and today's date is August 28th. I'll leave the end date open because I'm still entering client information for this caseload. On the next tab, we have assessments due. This is to remind us if we have an assessment due for a client in the next 2 weeks. I can give you an example of this. In the next tab, we have client information. So let's say we enter a client whose name is Megan Smith. The client ID will have to be a given identification number which is consistent between the tracker, the RIMDS, and the emergency department data. The DIVERT subgroup is either 9, 10, 14, or 15, depending on the risk group that was assigned, whether this was a new or existing client, whether they were included or excluded from the trial. Let's say that they were included, then they were not excluded. The reason for exclusion would have been palliative care or dialysis. There may be another reason as well that you could describe. And whether they agreed to at least one aspect of the intervention. If they refused all aspects, we could give a reason. The assessment date and the enrollment date are often the same date. The assessment date is the date that the client first received your consultation, and the enrollment date would be the date they were entered into the trial. So let's say that was August 28, or actually let's give a different example. Let's say the assessment date was 2017, and the month was February, and it was the 3rd. Now the enrollment date will make the same date, so 2017, February 3rd. So these visits will auto-populate to let us know the expected week 8, week 15, and 6-month follow-up date. The actual intervention end date is blank right now because this is going to be the last date the client received care, and it's usually the same time as the week 15 follow-up date. Okay, so now that we have our visits populated, let's go to assessment due. So now we can see that there's at least one assessment due in the next 2 weeks. The week 8, week 15, and 6-month follow-up date are missing. And so we can see that the client ID, which is right now nothing because we haven't entered it, is showing up for these visits. If we had a client who also had the same kind of information, so let's pretend that. Let's make it go down here. Now in assessment due, we can see that in that particular row for that client, those assessments are due as well. And we can change the client ID. So that that's consistent for each row. So that's kind of how that works. Let's suppose that we have a client and they stopped their home care services. So they're not going to get an assessment due for their 6th month anymore. We can simply delete that client so we don't have that as a reminder. So that's how that works. Okay, so let's head back to client information. So we've got our dates. Next up, we have our intervention details. So this will cover each aspect of the intervention, and it will discuss if the client consented or not to that aspect. So let's say they consented to nurse-led self-management. They were first offered it on August 28th, and they first received care also on August 28th. I'm just making up days. Okay, for the hotline, let's say that they agreed to the hotline, we offered it to them on, I guess this is going to be for next year, and then the receive date will leave blank if the client never actually called into the hotline. And we'll do the same thing for vaccines offered, so this would be whether they consented, when they were offered vaccines, and when they first received the vaccine. And same thing for advanced care goal planning, clinical pharmacist medication reconciliation, teen case rounds, SBAR communication, and standard ED transition package. In the next tab, we have baseline information. So this is for the first assessment which is done, and when it was actually done, and whether it was in phone or in person. So the process guide will tell us whether it should be in phone or in person, but the tracker will tell us what actually happened. And then we have our 13 PAM questions. So let's say that we go through the tracker and we write down what the client said for each of the 13 PAM questions. If we have a missing question, we'll leave it blank and we'll disregard the estimated PAM level. This is calculated for your convenience, and it'll let you know how to tailor your intervention to the client based on their education level. Okay, so based on these questions, the estimated PAM level is 3. And this will be automatically calculated for us. And that would be the end of the baseline visit. In the next tab, we have the week 8 visit. Again, we can see that the identifiers have been consistent across the visits. We'll put in our actual week 8 visit time, whether it was actually in phone or in person, and then we have our 13 PAM questions. After that, we have our estimated PAM level, which is automatically calculated for us. And then we have our 14 symptoms questions. So these mimic the RIMDS, so they're the same response options. And they go from received influenza vaccination, loss of appetite, chest pain, lack of bowel movements, dizziness or lightheadedness, edema, shortness of breath, pain, and so on, all the way to compliancy with medications. And that'll be week 8. In week 15, we have the expected visit date, the actual visit date, whether it was in phone or in person. Then we have our 13 PAM questions, just like before, the estimated PAM level, our 14 symptoms questions, which takes us to question 28. And then after that, we have our quality of life questions. These are only in the week 15, and they go from hearing and being understood all the way up to from the client's point of view, pain intensity disrupts usual activities, and these are also taken straight from the RIMDS, so they have the same response options. In the 6-month visit, it's the same kind of thing. We would put the actual visit date, whether it was in phone or in person, our 13 PAM questions, followed by our 14 symptoms questions. If the client is no longer receiving home care services and will not receive a 6-month visit, then this can be left blank. Thank you so much for listening to this tutorial, and hope to help.